I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar on government soft landings, which is sponsored by the Construction Innovation Hub. This webinar is part of Building's week-long series of events examining how digital technologies can revolutionise construction. I am Thomas Lane, the technical editor of Building. Government soft landings is a process that helps central government clients carefully evaluate and define the outcomes they want from a project, and that it performs as set out in the brief once it's completed. This process is underpinned by BIM, as the data needed for the process to work effectively will be contained within the model. This data will also help to ensure buildings are operated as efficiently as possible, which is the ultimate objective of government soft landings. In this webinar, David Philp, the Impact Director of Digital for the Construction Innovation Hub, will highlight the benefits government soft landings approach brings to improving performance. He will also explore the enhanced outcomes it brings to public services to ensure they improve whole life value to users, owners, and society at large. Stephen Batcheler is a project director for the Department for Education, and he will talk about how government soft landings has been applied to new schools projects and the progress to date. And finally, Paul Dodd, the head of infrastructure technologies at the Scottish Futures Trust, will talk about the Scottish Government's BIM and soft landings activities at a national level and how this aligns with the focus on the whole life performance process. So the process is going to be today, each speaker will talk for 15 minutes, and once the presentations are over, we will take questions from the audience. And you can submit your questions during the presentations, or you can wait for them to finish. So first up is our first speaker is David Philp, who is the Impact Director of Digital for the Construction Innovation Hub. So it's over to you, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. So looking forward to this morning. If you can put my second share my screen.
You are sharing your screen at the moment. We can see it.
Oh, great stuff. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining my session today. And I'm sure, along with my fellow presenters, we're really looking forward to giving you our thoughts, as you heard from Thomas, on digital asset performance and how that converges with government soft landing. So we're really looking forward to giving you everything today. So just a quick who am I? Obviously, it's a virtual conference today. As you heard from Thomas, I'm one of the impact directors for the Construction Innovation Hub. I look after digital. My background, I'm a construction manager and engineer, but probably for the last decade, I've been working in an increasingly digitized sector, working with, as you heard from Thomas, talking about themes such as building information modeling, digital asset management, and increasingly thinking about real-time dynamic data in terms of digital twinning. So I'm really looking forward to letting you know how Hub, through digital and government soft landings, are helping put outcomes and asset performance right front and center of our programme. And we think it also plays a big factor in terms of sector recovery as well. So probably a good question to kick off with is actually who are Hub. And Hub essentially brings together expertise from three centres: the Manufacturing Technology Centre, Building Research Establishment, and the Centre for Digital Built Britain. And our goal is very much in terms of how we can transform UK construction sector. We launched back in 2018 and were funded through the UK Research and Innovations Transforming Construction Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. There's a mouthful for this time in the morning. And this challenge aims to transform the sector through fusing together manufacturing technologies, digital ways of working that are trusted and secure. Also, our goal is boosting productivity, but a big part, as you can see from the diagram as well, is about asset performance, how it can benefit society through better measurement and assessment of outcomes as well within there. And again, but looking back to the diagram, you can see we're putting performance and user needs right at the heart of decision making. We're starting to think about creating information models that are focused on value-based procurement, performance measurement, and you can see within there in terms of outcomes, starting to create structured feedback loops. And what does this do? Well, it enables a golden thread of data, purpose, and increasingly digital twinning to allow future decisions that will be based on evidence and real-time project experience. We have a digital framework. So digital, if you like, is a thread that runs right the way through the Hub programme. Our digital tools will help inform value-led decision-making, support digital compliance, and improve information management. And our digital framework sets out, as you heard from Thomas, what data is actually required to support decisions through soft landings, what data requires for performance measurement, and how should it be curated as well. So one of the things that Thomas did mention as well was actually, how does this fit within building information modelling? Increasingly, we're seeing a shift from what was BIM Level 2 to the UK BIM Alliance, and we're working along with the British Standards Institute, the UK BIM Alliance, to help shift towards the UK BIM framework, including ISO 19650 and government soft landings. We're also driving an international programme to ensure that UK cements its world-leading position in terms of building information modelling. And we're working with government and the National Infrastructure Commission to drive adoption of national digital twin principles as well. So what we're seeing is, in summary at this beginning, digital and applied technologies can help us model and understand parameters of sustainable operation and actually optimize whole life CO2 outcomes, transforming how and what we build. And that's a big part of soft landings. It helps us drive towards high performing assets. It's encouraging the use of high performance computing. And again, when we think about the government soft landings, how we can start to fuse with energy analysis, Internet of Things, and actually start to think about how we can better achieve the fundamental goal of net zero. So what does this all mean in the context of soft landings? Well, background, probably now for many years, government has talked about that need, if you like, to improve the value offered by construction. And it's been a key objective. You go back to the government construction strategy back in May 2011, and then it was reinforced by transforming infrastructure performance. And the key objective for government soft landings was to align interest between those who design and construct an asset, i.e. the capital teams, with those who subsequently use it. How we start to, if you like, bridge the operational chasm. So the big part is about alignment between the interests of those who design and construct and those who use it. It's underpinned by two standards as well, which form part of the UK BIM framework, BS 8536 Part 1 and 2. And what I would say, these standards are free to download as PDFs as well. And you can see one of the key focuses that uses in the title is about better briefing within there, but it's essentially government soft landings, and it sets out, if you like, an extended aftercare period. So number one, better briefing. How do we better brief to align with operational objectives? How do we start to think about optimization of operation performance? But let's go back. The big part is, how do we make sure we align the operation performance with what we set out at the very beginning, our operational objectives, right at the start of the design and construction period. So if this is the start of your journey, I would suggest that you have a look at these standards. If you go into the UK BIM framework, you can download them free of charge. The Construction Innovation Hub, this one was led by Centre for Digital Built Britain, UK BIM Alliance and BSI, put together last year government soft landings guidance. And again, this is free of charge. If you go in, you'll see it, and it explains how government soft landings works within the principles of ISO 19650, which are our new international set of standards for building information modelling. It sets out how it aligns to BS 8536 and also draws on the BISRIA soft landings framework as well, which we think is really helpful to read in conjunction. But one of the things it does, we think is really, it starts to talk about proportionality. So government soft landings should work with any size or complexity of project. And a bit like BIM, how do you dial up and dial down to meet with your needs as well? So some great guidance that frames it within there as well. On the right-hand side, you can see Dr. David Hancock, who's construction director at IPA. And David says GSL reminds us actually what we design construct is about aiding performance of our facilities. And actually, it's an opportunity for better outcomes to be delivered. So government soft landings, if we can set goals and monitor performance targets right from the beginning, we can actually ensure that facilities are more productive and deliver better value and better outcomes. And again, the big part where we are now, it's going to actually help support the operational objectives of the UK BIM framework as well. I want to give a real practical example. This diagram shows how performance outcomes tie in with BS 8536 soft landings, but also the wider UK BIM framework as well. So one of the things, if you go through your project, you're going to have a series of key decisions or information exchanges as you go through your project for your different stages. These are going to be backed up by a series of plain language questions, the amount of a performance outcome, and the level of proportional information need within there. And what we're starting to do is be able to link them up to our information requirements through project and exchange information requirements. So being able to articulate information needs to support key decisions. Now here's a good example. This is from our National Health Service in Scotland, who Hub have been working with. And what they're saying is, as you go through your government soft landings process, each reality check meeting should have clear purpose of what you want to review and test within there. And they give an example of it might be a plant room. You maybe had a lesson learned from a previous project. There's maybe been insufficient maintenance zone. So they've articulated their plain language question. Is there sufficient space in the plant room for maintenance staff to actually undertake safe inspections or plan preventative maintenance or repair? So a very simulated, articulated question that relates to operation. And the information required to test, or the information requirements, is the main contractor or the principal supply chain to write a 3D soft clash model of the plant room spaces, and maybe report that determines suitability of maintenance zones as well. So starting to bring together, as Thomas said, soft landings, but how it's powered by building information modeling and simulation as well. Well, why are we doing this? And this actually goes right back to, again, around about 2011. And, the key things were, built assets not performing as they should, especially in point of handover. And that was often caused by poor briefing. And also, we dropped the baton so many times. We had a great capital project, but at the point of handover to the operational teams, especially that as-built information set and the rich data was dropped. It wasn't transferring into asset registry or computer-assisted facilities models or being used or curated. So there's a huge value driver behind soft landings, but I think the imperative is starting to improve asset performance. As I mentioned, Hub have been working with National Health Service Scotland, and again, I think this is a really good case study. And as they've said, government soft landing supports for them the golden thread of purpose and information right through their whole building life cycle. It creates a simple set of framework for the project team, and it also gives clarity from inception and briefing about user needs and expectations. It gets users involved, and it starts to make sure we've got a user-led brief. It comes a good fundamental process for capital teams as well to focus on operational outcomes, which has probably been missing as well. And it also sets, I think, a really good framework for setting performance targets and how we can actually check them, as we've seen in the last slide. Also, government soft landings puts a much more focus on building readiness, especially during the point of commissioning. The other big part is beyond delivery. It's putting more emphasis on soft landings during that initial settling period. And we're starting to think about post-occupancy evaluation and how we can work together and get a project team to start to think about progressively fine-tuning to actually meet the performance targets as well. And National Health Service Scotland put 5 pillars, focus on outcomes. How do we set an operational strategy that's got clear purpose and user needs defined right from the very beginning and embodied within the brief, making sure there's accountability and responsibility through clear roles and responsibility for soft landings, smart performance targets which can actually be tested, and making sure that soft landing is embedded sufficiently in contracts and procurement. And the big part as well is starting to think about how we support end user needs and evaluating success and lessons learned and aftercare and post-occupancy evaluation. And one of the things I've done is put a focus on the roles and responsibility. You can see the one there for the soft landings champion, but also how that role fits in with project sponsors, project directors, and indeed the supply chain as well. And their view is you need someone that's going to represent the needs of the end users, and that might be from staff, it might be specialist groups such as infection control within there, but someone that's going to provide a proactive voice for end users and actually, where appropriate, challenge that design criteria to ensure that the project is maintainable, cost effective, and is going to meet the needs of that end user. So the Construction Innovation Hub has been working with NHS Scotland to actually produce what we've called a Government Soft Landings Interactive Navigator. And Stephen will talk about the one that DFE has now developed as well. Simple tool, but we think effective. And this is if you like, the landing page. And what it does for NHS, it reminds people who are doing it is to come in every time that what we're doing has got purpose, the value we're trying to achieve. And actually, one of the things you can say that their purpose is there is actually about providing national solutions to improve health and well-being of the people in Scotland. It's not just about building something, but something about value. And this reminds us as we go in. Now, what does this tool do? Well, it helps to create, if you like, a framework, a roadmap for other departments. And it's funny, Thomas said, is this something that's in pure weight government departments? We don't reckon so. We reckon it could be used by any sort of asset owner to, create a framework within there, no matter what the value. And you can see the overarching plan of work that NHS Scotland use. So each stage has a series of task-based for soft landings and checklists as well. So let's just go into an early stage. It's all interactive. You can see during their initial agreement stage, You can see within the pink bounding box, there's 9 key tasks. I'll just pick out a few of them at random. Defining the project's operational vision and strategy right from the beginning, getting on board the responsibilities and roles of soft landings champion. But we're also starting to think about lessons learned from previous projects. We're starting to think about benchmarking, and we're starting to think about early thinking about aftercare and the FM strategy. So we're starting to think even from the earliest stages as to how we can embed soft landings into initial agreements. And one of the things that the tool does as well, it looks at key stage objectives. So again, it's a great aid memoir for if you're a project director or a senior responsible officer. Have you driven clarity about operational objectives? Have you got clear roles and responsibilities? And have you learned lessons learned? How it fits with our standards, but also a simple checklist as well for those end users, trying to take something rather big and take it much more bite size as well. We can move on. We're maybe now at an outline business case with a concept design that's growing. We're now thinking more and more, or they are anyway, about setting targets. Targets for security, environmental performance, and economic targets within there as well. That's maybe going to pull in other data. It might be in terms of environmental impact or cost benchmarking. But you can start to see one of the key things at this point in time they're aiming to do is to make sure they've got they've captured the end user requirements to feed it into the brief as well. And you've got detailed operational outcome and focus briefs. Now, this works its way right through the whole of the process, and it comes key, if you like, for their key authorization reviews. But big focus early doors on setting targets and establishing target monitoring plans as we go within there as well. So you can see the key targets, but you can see all the things round about it as well that form as reference data, but also building up very much in concert with this, not just soft landings in isolation, but how it aligns with the BIM strategy for the project as well, which we think is hugely important. And down the bottom, you can see is the information exchanges support the key project decisions. Now, that's our plain language questions we talked about, how that fits in with the UK BIM framework. And again, we can see within there, the key elements about having key stage objectives. Have you established smart performance targets? Have you established your aftercare strategy? And again, a key targets within there. Well, what does this do? This is the back page, but you can see within there for them, government soft landings is about putting customers at the heart. Their goal by doing soft landings is to maintain, build, and trust. And you can see within there, they kind of break it down at a real headline level into 4 things. It's understanding the customers, the end users, what their needs are, early doors, through the voice of the soft landings champion. We communicate it clearly through the brief. We're making sure we're delivering excellently. We're constantly testing it for the use of BIM and simulation. And in terms of post-occupancy evaluation, we are testing, and making sure we're refining to make sure we align those outcomes with what we originally set out as well. Well, what about impact is being used already in the National Elective Care Programme up in Scotland, and the feedback we've had from, does it work? Well, the feedback from the soft landings champion that include people that are clinical managers, maybe from a non-construction or built environment, have highlighted that the navigator actually make the process easy to understand and practical to implement. Well, so what does this mean? We think that bringing together as part of the UK BIM framework, government soft landings plays key in terms of setting key briefing that's outcome focused, and it creates a very simple framework that we believe is going to have real impact within there as well. We also think there's some great documents that's going to help you in your journey within there. Please go into UK BIM framework, look at the standards, and look at the great guidance that's going to support your journey as well within there. So if you do want in contact, you can see some of our key ones. Follow us at CIH_hub, or have a look at the website. We'd love to hear from your stories, especially if you're adopting government soft landing. So thank you for listening to our story, and we look forward to question and answers at the end of today's session.
Great, well, thanks very much, David. Before I move on to Stephen, just wanted to ask you, I mean, you're obviously doing a lot of work within particularly with the navigator for National Health Scotland. I mean, once you've got this sort of tool sort of fully refined, I mean, do you see the next stage to roll this out as a tool that the rest of the industry could use, private sector companies? And I'm kind of thinking about the role you had at the BIM task force and how you developed all the protocols and standards to enable the industry to adopt BIM.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a good question, Thomas. One of the things is we want to make sure all these concepts can get, implemented at scale and are going to be used. one of the things we're going to be doing next is, we said this is a good, so you've got the, if you like, the standards, which are fixed, we've got the guidance, but now it's trying to create the practical tools. And we're about to do one now for local authorities, which, if you like, is more of a vanilla version, which we reckon will be great for industry and procurers at large within there. So that's the next part. So the idea is by the end of this process, we'll have created a series of tools, a series of case studies, which augment and support the standards and the guidance around about government soft landings. But as you rightly said, it's just getting the rubber hitting the road. It's making sure that procurers are really thinking about, the key principles there. You can do government soft landings without them, but the real power brings when you start to put digitization, smart use of data, simulation behind it to actually test these plain language questions as well. And the big part, the golden thread of information, we talked about that sort of decoupling between construction and operation. And we think government soft landings really starts to bridge the two together within there, giving that continuous flow of data between. So we think government soft landings plays an important part in so many, but the big part is it's going to help us get better outcomes. And that's the key thing about our built environment, isn't it? We've got clear purpose, and that's something I'm quite passionate about.
Great, well, thanks very much, David. So we're now going to move on to our next presenter, Stephen Batcheler, who's a project director for the Department for Education, and he's going to talk about how government soft landings has been applied to schools projects. Thank you, Stephen.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Stephen Batcheler. I'm a project director for the Department of Education. I work in the design team, and we're clearly specialising in looking at the design of schools. Next. So first of all, what I wanted to do was to define what soft landings means for the public sector. And clearly government soft landings for public sector buildings is basically looking for better outcomes through both design and construction, using government soft landings and building information modelling, ISO 1915650, to add value to the operational life cycle of an asset. Next slide. So the school projects, just to give you an understanding of what we're actually talking about in terms of DFE. Next. DFE clearly currently runs two capital build programs, the Priority School Building Program and the Free School Program. And every year we actually refurbish or build new roughly 200 projects. So that's 200 projects completed annually. Now, the value of each school project varies depending on the type and size of school, quite clearly, but capital costs are published on gov.uk, the website, once the projects are completed and costs have been fully finalised. So you can see the information and costs for each school. In addition, the construction programmes normally last between about 12 months and 2 years, but on average, it's about 18 months for each project. Next. And next, so the aim of this process for the DFE is really for the entirety of the DFE projects to adopt soft landings right from project inception and follow it through to the development of the project right to handover. So we have a complete chain. What we're looking for when all new school buildings is to ensure that the school gets what it wants in terms of requirements for building functionality and operational performance. What is it that the head teacher and the school require? And that is what we are looking for in each design. But it also has to be sufficiently flexible and adaptable to accommodate future changes. Clearly, these new school buildings that we are putting up last for about 60 years. And over a period of 60 years, we all know how much things change. We are also looking to make sure that the transition from the construction site to occupation by the school of that new school building is bump-free. Clearly, what we're striving for is to ensure that the ability to the school to reach its optimum learning capability as fast as possible, so that the children get the maximum opportunity to learn as soon as possible. And then finally, we really want to make sure that the buildings meet the school performance requirements, and hence the reason to bring the head teachers and the school in at the start of the project. What is it that they require in terms of functionality, effectiveness, and the performance they require? So from day one, we are now bringing both staff and pupils in to look at what's required and what they want. Next. And next. So there are quite a few challenges. Clearly, Cabinet Office announced in April 2016 that all publicly funded construction projects should be delivered in accordance with government soft landings, and that is quite a task. And when you're building 200 buildings in a government department, that is quite a task. In addition, DfE buildings use design and build contracts, so actually we're reliant on the contractor. DfE also, as you well know, well imagine, we do not occupy the eventual building. We are the client while it's being built, but at the end, the building is handed over to the school and the school becomes the end user. Then, of course, the soft landing strategy has to align with existing DfE project and contract management processes. Clearly, because we had so many schools in design, under construction and newly completed, we cannot just drive straight through existing contract management processes. So that had to be looked at. And as David has described, we wanted to make sure that we were in full alignment with the latest government soft landing standards. And then it came really down to the development of training programs and presentations on how we were going to deliver soft landings to not only DfE project managers, but our range of technical advisors, our contractors, and their supply chain. Next. Next. So the development process. Clearly, as David identified, we have to appoint a soft landings champion to lead the development work group, and that fell to me. And what I did was to gather and study a lot of information that we'd seen on soft landings. We also then went to the Building Services Research Information Association because they had put out the first program and plan for soft landings, and to see what they had done. Then clearly we had to overlay their work with the government soft landing strategy. Now that adds targets. It adds targets for building functionality and effectiveness, for financial performance, for the environment, and also for performance against the planned targets. So basically what the school said it wants, when it's handed over, the new building is handed over, is the school actually getting what it required? We then created a soft landing strategy, and we asked a range of people, right across the people who are working with us, all our stakeholders, for comment. And once that got to a point where we could build something, we then set up pilot studies with some of the schools. And the pilot studies worked through the process with everyone on the stakeholder teams, the contractors, the TAs, but most importantly, the head teachers, so that they could see the process from end to end. Once everybody had had their say and we got all the information back, we then refined the initial proposals and also updated the soft landing strategy that we were using. That was the 2013 to meet the RIBA Work Plan 2020. And that was quite important so that we had the latest information. We then developed the training program and then rolled this out across DfE programs. Next slide, please. So, as David said, we have worked very extensively with the Construction Innovation Hub and David and his team, and we've used the training navigator. Now, as you can see, what we've got here is the various RIBA stages, showing exactly the plan as to what is required at which stage. We then have a checklist, and the checklist for each stage confirms that all the tasks that need to be done have been done before we move to the next stage. Next slide, please. Now, what I've done here is identified handover. And on the left-hand side in the numbers, you will see that 6.1, 6.2 and so forth refers to the RIBA work plan stage. So this is handover, stage 6. Then we have a project task. What exactly is it that we require to be done at this stage? Then we have a more detailed task, which gives the parameters and sets out exactly what is required. We then have the contractor, who is the task lead. And on some of the tasks in other areas, it could be the technical advisor or the DFE project manager, or the school, in fact. And then, as a result of the Work Plan 2020, the RIBA Work Plan 2020, we now have a required output for each task. And in fact, some of these outputs may only be the authorization to go forward. Some of them, for example, on defects or on non-conformance or on lessons learned, require the contractor to produce a document which actually shows what the defects were, how we've learned lessons learned, and how non-conformance can be turned around. And that, of course, helps us for new projects. So once we've done all these tasks and they've then been ticked off, next one, please. We then, and this is the end, this is the stage, the final stage, extended aftercare. And as David described, we have a series of key tasks in the blue box to organize various things, the various things that have to be done. Then we collate and structure any of the feedback, including the defects, non-conformance, and lessons learned. And at that stage, we then go for approval and sign off. Is the project complete? And if you look on the left-hand box, the big red box, it says, for a gateway approval, to get completion approval for this project, have these tasks been completed? And those are crucial. And this is done at a feasibility meeting or a complete project meeting where we actually go through and check, is everything ready before we go ahead? Next stage. And next. So what were the findings? Basically, that to do this strategy with a big government department producing a lot of buildings annually is a significant task. It did take time. You need to get everybody on board. You need to get help. We then, as it says here, undertook considerable research, and we had a lot of help from BISRA, and all the information that we could gather was put together. We set up a dedicated team with a wide range of skills because things have to be developed, they have to be reviewed and tested to make sure that we're doing the right thing at the right stage. We then had to persuade my DFE board, the governance board, that what we had designed would work. We had to persuade our program managers who are running the PSPB and free school programs, and we had to look at individual project managers on the ground who were doing the work. And then we had to talk to our technical advisors and contractors. So there was a large communication exercise where we had to telegraph exactly what we were going to do and exactly what we required them to do. Once that was done, we then had pilot studies where we tested the processes in real schools in real time with everybody looking on. And then we refined the soft landings processes and strategies, as you saw, for example, in handover, to make sure that what we were asking for was actually what we needed and it could be delivered. And this was done on all of a range of all the processes were developed for a range of schools at construction, various construction stages. Next. And so we looked at the benefits. Now, we've been doing this for about a year, and the evidence suggests, we're not there yet, but it suggests that because of the lack of the misinterpretation that we'd had and the reduced misinterpretation, the reduced failure, the rejection in poor communication or unrealistic expectations, we have reduced the number of errors. Now, because we've reduced the errors, that reduces the total timescales due to the unplanned or unexpected delays. Because we've anticipated the problems, they haven't come up, therefore we can push the project forward. It has also reduced construction costs because defaults or rectification work, either after handover or in fact before handover, is much less. And as a consequence, what that really does is mean that we don't have the level of staff returning to site after the handover during the 12-month defect liability period. And as a consequence, we have improved the timescale for schools to reach the optimum performance. And clearly, when you deliver a new school, the crucial thing is to have a school that works and that the education of students is ready to go as fast as possible. And finally, we've improved the well-being of the school and its occupants, the pupils and staff, because the pupils and staff have had a say in what they're going to get. They can watch the building being developed right from the ground upwards, and actually they can go and visit it during the construction, and we work with the contractors to achieve that. So when the building is ready, the pupils and staff know exactly what they're going to get. They've seen what they're going to get, and actually they're looking forward to it, and so they know that they've had a say in it. And as a consequence, the pupils get down to work much more quickly, and you don't have stressed head teachers and school staff who are rushing around trying to do education, but also trying to fix a building. And that is quite important. And I think that is the final slide. Thank you.
Well, great. Thanks very much, Stephen. Just got a quick question. In your presentation, you alluded to the procurement route for DFE schools, which is design and build. And I can see you've got quite a rigorous process in the interactive navigator to make sure the different delivery points are sort of checked off. I mean, do you think there's another form of procurement which is more sort of better suited to the soft landings process other than design and build?
Well, the fact is that design and build has done very well. Clearly, we've got so many schools that we cannot do this traditionally internally ourselves. I think that there are clearly there are less people involved in doing the traditional route, and we would decide, or a company would decide what it wanted to do. But actually, once you've got the process underway, it wasn't particularly difficult with the design and build. It's really a question of working much more closely with all the stakeholders to ensure that you get the product that you want. And that, of course, clearly involves the school staff, the contractors, their supply line, the technical advisors, and our project managers. So the design and build element really means that stakeholders, everybody, has to work very carefully and very closely and cooperate and communicate effectively.
And yeah, and you presume to get the best outcomes, you need to do that anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Stephen. So we're now going to move on to our last presenter, Paul Dodd, who is the Head of Infrastructure Technologies at the Scottish Futures Trust. Is going to talk about implementing government soft landings in Scotland. Thank you, Paul.
Perfect. Thank you, Thomas. Yes, so good morning, everybody. Yes, so thank you, Stephen and David, for that overview. With the time I have this morning, I was going to give you, as Thomas said, an overview through the lens of whole life asset performance, and more of a focus on the constituent parts to support a kind of soft landings approach, and thinking about how you measure asset performance through the whole life cycle. My name is Paul Dodd. I work with an organisation, Scottish Futures Trust. Slides work. Yeah, so that's working. So for those less familiar with Scottish Futures Trust, we are a Scottish government funded organisation, and our role and remit is to support and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of infrastructure. And our role is really to support the public sector, but working heavily with industry to create solutions and outcomes to improve the performance of infrastructure and ultimately to improve the services that they deliver. In terms of my role, involved in infrastructure technology, but one of my the larger pieces of work that we're involved with is supporting Scottish Government BIM programme, and I've been doing that since 2015. And I suppose I was keen to share some of the lessons from that BIM programme and also the kind of linkages with soft landings and how they come together. So the Building Information Modelling programme for Scottish Government began in 2015, and then culminated in 2017 with the launch of Scottish Government policy. And then we also developed a guidance portal as well to support the policy. And our role continues in supporting BIM within public sector projects, and we continue to support public bodies implement BIM within projects. And I suppose one of the lessons we found through that journey and through supporting public sector is fundamentally it's about information management, and David touched on that earlier, but it's also about thinking about the constituent parts to implement BIM. And when you speak to projects or public sector bodies, the majority, which is a really positive sign, will say that they are doing BIM. But when you start to ask those same projects and authorities about the constituent parts, you start to see that there may be gaps or areas that need to evolve and be supported, ultimately to deliver that ultimate ambition of why you're implementing BIM. And with that lesson, I suppose you could apply it within the context of soft landings, because there's many constituent parts that need to come together to support that soft landings approach. And both Stephen and David touched on some of those areas earlier. And I have to say, there is a lot of good stuff happening around these elements within public sector contracts and within industry currently. And back within the BIM programme itself, we understood and recognised the value of a soft landing approach, and we did include guidance within the BIM guidance portal to allow public bodies to consider if they wanted to adopt that within their projects. The guidance you're seeing now is aligned to the historic 1192 suite of standards. So I would point you to the guidance that David referenced to earlier. But again, just to give you a bit of background in terms of our role and support around the soft landing space. In terms of performance, I suppose a conversation we continue to have, and one that is really important, is just this differentiator between performance and outcomes. And if we take the well-used car industry, the industry itself has a well-defined set of performance metrics, ways they measure how well that car performs, and that allows the industry to refine, to improve going forward. And the core purpose or outcome of that asset is to take you from A to B efficiently, quietly, and cheaply. But when you come to outcomes, those outcomes can be impacted by external factors, petrol prices, congestion, whatever it may be. But a key part of this puzzle is actually to be confident in the fact that that asset is performing well, and then address the outcomes that it's led to support. So a really important point between the two areas. And if we took that to a building context, where we look to go and where we're moving to is a space where buildings of any type will have a set of performance metrics, whatever they become, and that'll be able to inform building owners, building users, how well they're operating that building, how they should invest in that building, and whether they can maintain it and supporting the whole life performance. So that's where we'll go, and ultimately the performance in that asset will support the required outcomes, and if it was a hospital, outcomes, health outcomes, jobs, well-being, etc. So an interesting differentiator that we continue to talk around and understand better and communicate with public bodies. Like I said, in taking the example we talked about around our learnings from the BIM programme, for us, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And for us, it's about, and David and Stephen touched on this, it's about linking best practice together to support a kind of performance monitoring led approach throughout an asset life cycle. And as with any refinement and evolution, there'll be weaker parts of that chain. And I suppose the obvious example now is the handover of information from completion through to operation. But equally, that weak link in the chain could be a poor brief, and how you define that brief and the performance. So thinking about those constituent parts is really important, and how we link them together. And for the purposes of this morning's conversation, just to kind of highlight for us some of the areas we see as being key parts and areas we're supporting in terms of this process about performance monitoring, and then to support a soft landings approach. So the two threads at the bottom there are probably the kind of the golden thread of information that is used, digital information being that mechanism by which you can collect, derive insight and capture information and performance in doing so. And also the people factors. I think there's a big space around greater collaboration, trying to overcome some silos within that performance monitoring, and also the resource and skills. And in terms of the ones above, those other areas, so our role is supporting, refining and developing these areas within SFT. And colleagues within Scottish Futures Trust are looking at certain aspects. So we're looking at developing informed briefing and supporting briefing and supported monitoring, thinking about how you go from strategic outcomes through to David's point around performance measurements, thinking about how that is done on a consistent basis within projects. So that continues. I think as well, we probably recognise some of the good stuff that's happening within the public sector. So this is the NHS's pretty comprehensive business case process. So supporting investment decisions. David touched on it earlier. We've supported the development of one similar for local authorities, but there's a lot of, it offers a really robust platform upon which you can plug in a soft landings or a greater focus on performance within your delivery of your assets. So that's to be recognised and used because it is there and it is very, very valuable in terms of how we do this going forward. We talked about digital information management. Our work continues. We've developed an information management plan. Colleagues of ours are looking at that and leading on that. And the plan, again, looking at defined information exchanges, thinking about information through the process and ultimately to deliver kind of robust asset information. And there are continuing work around working groups, around project handover information. What should that look like? How do we derive consistency to support informed demand and ultimately support industry and how it responds to that demand? So trying to proportionate and simplify where we can. So that work continues. And then in terms of the quality information, very important, the quality of the product, reducing errors, prevention is better than the cure, resolving errors during operation. So colleagues are looking at the quality assurance initiatives, so trying to resolve design issues collaboratively amongst teams to mitigate risk when we come to the operation of the assets. So that's a key piece, not just specifically to the monitoring, but actually the outcomes themselves. And then the last two areas, one area we think will evolve and we're keen to support with industry is the development of what do we measure and why. So looking at the multitude of metrics across the asset life cycle that can be used and helping inform kind of performance-led briefing, how we might measure both from how we deliver, operate and dispose of the assets. So thinking about those metrics and the benchmark data that sits behind it. And then the last area that will evolve and continues to evolve with that kind of digital perspective is how we then go on to monitor the performance of our assets in the future. And FM teams do it and do it very well, but with the rise of better information, digital models of our assets, but equally the automation of that through sensors. So this is some research we did with some of our innovation centres, continuing that conversation and application and moving to the growing conversation around the digital twin. So that's an area that will plug into this whole life performance assessment that will continue to evolve. So in terms of case studies, very briefly, this has been touched on and a really nice example in terms of aligning a soft landings approach to what is already a very robust business case investment decision-making process that NHS have. And David touched on some of how that is delivered, which is really useful. And then at a project level, we're seeing examples of, this is an example of Queensferry High School by City of Edinburgh Council, and this is more focused on a specific measure, so energy. So the team did a lot of development work in the design and construction phase to improve the modelling, to improve how we forecast and predict energy within the building. It's completed in this August, so it's just gone into operations. So that work will continue to look at the actual performance or energy use, which is really exciting as well. So yeah, I covered a lot of ground there, but I suppose yeah, that opportunity of looking the constituent parts, linking best practice together to drive that kind of end-to-end process and ultimately get that feedback loop into our future projects and inform future projects and ultimately improve the outcomes that they deliver in the future. So thank you very much.
Great, well, thanks very much, Paul. So we've got about 10 minutes for some questions. So if anyone wants to put a question forward, please do so. I've got a question to kick off, thinking about really maybe Stephen and Paul, who have actually implemented government soft landings. I mean, you've got in a project, you're involving the stakeholders, the end users of a building quite early on. So in the case of a school, it could be head teachers, it could be teachers, it could even be pupils. I mean, the people are very busy, they're focused on their day jobs. How do you get their buy-in to this process and then persuade them that it's in their interest when they have all these other pressures?
Well, clearly, if they're going to get a new school, then they'll want to have a very big say in what's going on. So you generally don't have to push too hard because clearly you want them to like what they're going to get. But the other big thing is that they get to set, for example, the performance targets. As we said, they get to sort of work out exactly how many rooms, what the rooms contain. So yes, they are very busy. And what generally happens with a school is that the head teacher will identify one of the other more senior staff, a deputy head perhaps, who will actually take responsibility for the school in terms of their project and will be overseen by the head teacher. So often it's the head teacher doesn't always attend every meeting, but he has one of his senior staff who does. And so to date, actually, there has been no problem getting the school to be involved because they want to see and want to have an input.
Great. And Paul, from your pilot projects, are you finding the same?
Yeah, I think the senior responsible officer is pivotal in that space, and that early conversation is fundamental. And if it can be effectively translated into the brief, then you've got that really strong starting point that then the design team all feed off and respond to. So that is really, really important. I also see a growing appetite from heads of property and facility management team who are actually dealing with the consequences of is it hard landings, is that the term? But areas when buildings come into bother or there's issues during the so because they're dealing with that on a day-to-day basis, there is an appetite to stop future projects falling into that same trap as well. So that's a really positive aspect as well.
Thank you. So another question is the feedback loop. So you have a successful project, you're getting a load of information, load of data coming back from performance, you know, sort of getting information from end users about that building, and you want to sort of develop a loop where you can feed the learnings into your next project. I mean, how far down the road are you with this process? How are you going to do that? How this information is going to be taken forward in a consistent way, maybe digitally? I don't know, maybe one for you, David, or anyone else?
It's one again using the engagement we've had with National Health Service Scotland. So one of the things they've done is they tried to create a very consistent template for capturing lessons learned, and done it very much on a thematic basis. So they've now said, you know, if does it relate to safety? You know, is it in terms of performance? Is it in terms of maintainability? So each health board using a very consistent template, and then that they're now starting to think about in terms of an AIM-CD, trying to create a common environment to share them into as well. And one of the things is great capturing it, but how do you use it on a typical project? And it goes back to something Paul has said. We've seen them, you know, on new projects get involved right at the very beginning, especially at capital planning level, where they're using the lessons learned and having development days, where they're having early and relevant holistic stakeholder communities that are focusing on relevant lessons from projects, previous projects as well. So we are starting to see the early doors of, you know, how we start to create that, you know, systematic feedback loop, but also, you know, how we use it. And I think development days, right at the very beginning of a project, you know, during initial assessment, getting everything together. And I think that's one of the beauties of information model. It creates a degree of common understanding, even from an early conceptual model. People can get round about it, they can ask relevant questions within there as well. We're doing that, let's be honest, where we're at, it's a relatively manual project. But as Paul said, you know, IoT, edge devices is going to start to give us more real-time feedback when we couple that with analytics and data visualization tools. So I think the whole soft landings is going to keep growing and growing. And I think the latency, between understanding of issues is going to get better and better as well. I'm sure we'll, in a couple of years' time, get to, if you like, repair before fail within there, and we can start to tie more and more testing into the soft landings process.
Yeah. I mean,
Stephen, did you want to come in?
I was just going to say that to us, frankly, the lessons learned process, we take that all the way along. And actually, when we start a new project, one of the crucial tasks is for the project soft landings champion to take the lessons learned from all the previous projects and put them on the table at the design and performance assessment stage and say, right, we know these were problems, we've got to learn for it on this new project. So yes, really quite important. The lessons learned process is very important to us.
And I mean, the DFE, you're doing your work, you've got the NHS in Scotland doing their work. I mean, are you sharing some of the kind of key, I mean, you've both got, I mean, it's both interactive tools to help to find the process. How much sharing is going on for the information to sort of, make the process more efficient, I guess?
Well, certainly I've been attending the cross-government committees, which David is sitting on, and CDBB and the Construction Innovation Hub are part of. And so we've actually been sharing quite a lot across the government departments.
And in terms of collaboration, so we sit on some of the UK working groups, BIM and others, and there's quite a lot of synergies with DFE as well. So we have workshops with them around sustainability specifically to start with, but we're kind of sharing through that way as well. So yeah, lots of lessons that can be gained from sharing. That's really important.
Okay, I mean, this is it's very ambitious, it's a very fantastic thing to be doing, what we should be doing, and it's obviously a major challenge to kind of get the process sort of up and running and rolled out. I mean, from where you're all sitting, I mean, how many years do you think it's going to take before this is a process that is refined and something that everyone's using and really should be rolled out into the private sector as well? How long do we think we're looking at? $1 million question.
I think going back to your last question, I think one of the biggest challenges is kind of hardwiring that feedback loop. I think you could be overwhelmed very quickly by the way you measure a building and the information that you could derive from it. And I think I'm ducking slightly the answer of how long, but just one of the big challenges in terms of making this real will be getting meaningful insight at the other end. And I think that'll be where a lot of work needs to go in. And there will be, as David said, refinement. We will make incremental benefits, and Stephen's talking about the examples DFE are learning from, and will improve again next time they do it. So it will definitely be a journey, and because of the constituent parts as well that need to come together, which is another challenge.
As I say, Thomas, I think we should be proud of the journey. I mean, Stephen mentioned, 2016, when it gave the sort of mandate for central government departments. You think, gosh, I mean, that's only 4 years ago, and I think we came on so significantly since then. I think we can see the rubber hitting the road now. Construction Innovation Hub, we're working with likes of MOJ and such like just now on their journeys, and I think it's going to continue to converge. But there's other things that we're doing within the program that I think are going to help. One of the things we're working on, it's a foundation data model, which is higher level ontologies, which will help sharing between sectors and departments as well. So back to Paul's one, actually, it can be quite hard to actually share all this performance data. So I think there's things that are coming out of the program that's going to help that longer term. I think it'll be a continuum as well. I mean, it's not going to be a case of it's a bit like building information model. It's not as if we ever get to a point. It's just about growing the value proposition over the years as well. Making things much more real time, especially I think as we come much more in terms of analytics as well. But we often talk about the technologies and everything. As Paul said I think it was his second last. Forgive me, Paul, if I got it wrong, but there's one he showed the foundation model, and I had people in collaboration.
Yeah.
This is still very much, we talk about soft landings. Let's not forget, this is very much about people, bringing people together around about a campfire as early as possible. early engagement with key stakeholders. So it's about people, it's about technology and data supporting the people within this process rather than the opposite way about as well.
Great, well, thank you. We're actually out of time now, so I'd like to sort of thank all our presenters for their presentations. It was really, really interesting. And I wish you all the best with the program and look forward to seeing how it goes. And I'd just like to say to our listeners, Digital Building Week is continuing, so please do come back for some of the sessions we've got lined up for you. And I'd like to thank everyone for listening. And this webinar will be available on demand. Thank you very much.